Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Greetings from the Climate Change Media Hub of Asian College of Journalism that is supported by Interlink Academy. Welcome to the series that we've been hosting for a couple of months now. And today's conversation explores the reporting challenge of tracking climate action plans, what actually works inside state systems. And we have two excellent speakers to walk us through how states actually execute climate action plans. Our first speaker, Mr. Srinivas Krishnaswamy, he's the founder, trustee, and CEO of Vasudha Foundation, which is a leading Indian climate and energy think tank he established in 2010. I have known Srinivas myself for almost 2 decades and have seen him and his experience of working on the intersection of sustainable development, energy policy, climate action, social equity. And under his leadership, Vasudha Foundation has actually partnered with central and state government on climate action planning, clean energy transitions, energy dashboards, which we're going to talk more about today, and equitable policy design. Our second speaker, equally illustrious, Dr. Nambi Appadurai, he's the director of climate resilience practice at World Resource Institute. He also brings decades of international and national experience in climate resilience, natural resource management, and environmental policy. He's been leading work on mainstreaming adaptation into development planning, climate proofing strategies, and scaling resilience solutions across local and state and national levels for almost 2 to 3 decades now. He has worked with institutions such as World Bank, Asian Development Bank, UNEP, CGIAR, and even MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, where he has done phenomenal work, which we can talk about later. But to go to today's conversations and welcome Srinivas, welcome Nambi. I am Shailendra Yashwant. I'm moderating the conversation today. Welcome everyone who has joined today. And without much ado, Srini, your website, the Vasudha Website Foundation, the dashboards and data portals are multiplying. I'm just amazed at the amount of information on those websites. Can you explain to us as to what decision gaps are they actually solving for the state government and central government? And I have then follow-up questions. I know you have a presentation, so we can go to that and start. Welcome, Srini.
Thank you very much, Shai, and a very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you so much to the ACJ Climate Hub for inviting me to share my views on addressing policy gaps, dashboards, data-driven analysis, and so on. Now, Shai, straight to your question, and let me, and can we, is the presentation on? Okay, it is, right? Okay. So now coming straight to the presentation and straight to your point, Shai, for us, dashboards and portals are not just about displaying numbers, right? I mean, numbers are there, but they are more about closing the gap between raw data and actionable decisions. What I would like to state upfront is that in recent times, both at the national level as well as at the state level, there are a number of dashboards, a number of data portals that various ministries and departments and agencies of Government of India and the state governments have actually put together. And then there are also multiple reports that various ministries, departments, and agencies bring together. But what each of these dashboards of the Government of India or the various line ministries and departments do is that they just portray data respect to their particular departments and their particular programs and not really a holistic picture. Now, if you look at the kind of action that is required for to put India on either a Viksit Bharat 2047 trajectory or for the matter a 2070 net zero, you need to bring in data from varied sources. You need to have a not a siloed approach, but you need to have an integrated approach to address climate change. So it's not just about clean energy, but clean energy's implication on land, clean energy's implication on water, water implication on clean energy, water availability, access on clean energy, and so on and so forth. So you have a lot of interrelated issues that need to be addressed. So what our dashboards try to do, not just the India Climate and Energy Dashboard, which is one, and I will take you through that. This is the work that we have done with Niti Aayog. All our other dashboards that we've done with the government of Tamil Nadu, the government of Gujarat, the government of Kerala, the government of Uttar Pradesh, and the government of Madhya Pradesh. So we have about 6, 7 dashboards that are up and running now. What it does is it brings together data from a wide range of sources and to give a very holistic picture. And I'll talk about the India Climate and Energy Dashboard. What the India Climate and Energy Dashboard that we have done with Niti Aayog brings out is it brings together data from the entire energy value chain, which is both historical and near real time. When I say near real time, the gap in data from today and what's available in the dashboard will be 2 or 3 days old, maybe maximum of 96 hours delay. So it's almost near real time. It also, to the energy value chain data, brings together data from the entire climate space and also the entire key economic indicators and demographic data. So the idea is that it gives you a holistic picture of where we are, and gives you a broad trends of energy transition trends, what have been the drivers of energy transition, what have been issues that needs to be addressed, so on and so forth. Now, some of the key issues that the climate dashboard brings in is renewable energy capacity addition, for instance. You really know what the progress is. You can look at it from multiple pages of the dashboard, and the links to it is all there in the presentation. One can open those links. And then you also see that, and when you look at climate action, it's not just about having a national target or a state target, but you need to have number of players also taking action. So the electricity distribution utilities, for instance, play a very, very major role in energy transition. So you also know what are the kind of trends of discoms, and then consumer profiles. You may have discoms which are largely agriculture consumers, which means that you need a different approach. You may be in an area where there's a lot of industries, which then would mean a different approach, looking at industrial decarbonization. So you would get all of that in one snapshot. Next slide, please. If you go to the next slide, and this sort of gives you a overview of the ICED. When I look at the ICED overview, you see that it has everything from energy, the entire energy value chain, from coal, oil, gas, solar, everything from the cost aspects, the procurement aspects, including aspects on potential and so on and so forth. It also identifies areas where coal comes out from. Very important, because if you're looking at thermal power plants deep down south where you don't have coal mines, a lot of these coal is actually coming from the east of India all the way down south. So that will add to the cost. So you can draw linkages to all of that. And then that would also mean a cost of electricity would also mean that there's a cost to the consumer, right? It's not just about electricity cost, generation cost alone, but what is the cost the consumer has to pay. So you can look at this, if you look at this, and I don't want to get into the details, but if you look at the broad overview from the entire energy value chain, including end use, industries, buildings, transport, agriculture, and all linked to energy. You also have the climate and environment, which is basically your greenhouse gas emissions, climate variability data, the impact of temperature changes on your electricity demand, right? All of those aspects are captured in this. The next slide, please. Now, coming to the specific question, how do dashboards actually help policy? Like I said, and I would like to reiterate here, that the data that we bring out in all our dashboards are not new, right? They already exist. It's not that something that Vasudha or a few civil society groups have just pulled it out from thin air. No, these are all data that's reported by various agencies, departments of Government of India and the state governments. But what it does is that it brings together, like I said, it brings together data in one place, and it also tries to draw the what shall I say, the linkages between data from various departments and how it sort of talks to each other to give you a holistic picture. So what it does primarily is to give you a holistic picture so that it helps in making policies that go beyond department levels or ministry levels, but gives you a holistic picture. And next slide, please. And I'll give you an example of how it works. And I already talked about this. So the correlation between GDP versus electricity consumption. Now, states with rising incomes and per capita, is there electricity consumption? Is there a direct link? Now, there could be, but at the same time, this is where it need not be, it need not be with per capita income. Your electricity consumption should also rise accordingly. You could bring in energy efficiency here. You could bring in. There's a huge role for demand side management. How do you manage consumer behavior, electricity consumption patterns, right? How will you ensure that is there enough of energy efficiency scale up, particularly at the consumer end in these states? So how do you bring that? How do you bring that linkage? Transmission and distribution networks. We talk of scaling up renewables, but then when you scale up renewables, you also need the transmission infrastructure and the distribution infrastructure to ensure that the evacuation. Having mere numbers, so you say you have 200 and 150 gigawatts of solar today, but then and there's also the generation, and and bulk of the generation comes during the daytime. So how will you evacuate it effectively, to reach consumers? So that's again the point. Investment planning. And then again, when I bring in temperature and peak demand, the implication of demand of temperature rise on demand, heat waves impacting grid, right? Peak loads, right? Because of space cooling, so on and so forth. So you get a complete picture when you look at that. And then again, it also helps you understand electricity demand patterns. So if you look at different cities here, next slide, please. So you have Delhi, Karnataka, Gujarat. So we have a few states here. You can see that. So, for example, down south, peak summer is usually February, March, whereas that's a time when in Delhi, I'm sitting in Delhi now, and I still don't have my AC on, right? Despite the fact that now February now is pretty hot, but I still don't have my AC on. Whereas I think the Bangaloreans would already have the AC on by now, right? But then when we switch on the AC here in Delhi, it is monsoon time or it is the rainy season in Karnataka, and then you may not have AC need in Bangalore. So you see that there's a different pattern. So these patterns also, because you're looking at a pan-India electricity grid, your electricity planning, the way the consumption patterns change would also play a very major role. And that's where data and policy making comes. Next slide, please. And then NDC tracker, where do we have? Now we submit our nationally determined contribution to the UNFCCC, but then is there a tracking of that? How do we track that on a real-time basis? So that's again, the data brings together. And again, you see that the NDC tracker has three different, one is your energy intensity to GDP. You also have your non-fossil fuel power capacity target, and then you have your forest target, your sinks target. So how do they talk to each other is what the NDC tracker also brings out. And I will talk about the last point, how to use data for a story building. It's not, when I say story building, it's how do you link all the dots together to get a holistic picture is what we are trying to do. I'll stop here for now, Shai, but I can go on. But I will, if there are any other points that you want me to cover, I'll be happy to do so.
Great. No, thanks. Thank you so much, Srini. That's been extremely useful. I have many questions to you. In fact, more questions than I had come planned for after seeing your presentation. But let's talk to Nambi, give you a little break, and come back to you. Yeah, if that's all right. Nambi, straight into, given the amount of work you've done, given the amount of work WRI is doing, from your work with states and cities, what does adaptation implementation actually look like on the ground? Because it's not one thing. It's not just raising a tower for, or a solar plant. There are multiple things involved. So what does it look like on the ground? Who leads it? And what are the multiple actions that you take when you're helping a state? Adaptation planning, which has become more important than anything else right now for our most vulnerable populations. So, Nambi.
Thank you, Shai. Thanks for having me here. And thanks to the Climate Hub. It's such a privilege to be part of this event. Before starting to responding to your question, I just want to sort of talk a little bit on the concept of notion of adaptation, because there is a subtle difference between mitigation and adaptation. I mean, what Srini presented is more process-oriented approach, where you have clear-cut process. It's a very linear function, unlike what you see in adaptation. It's more people-centric. Not that I'm saying mitigation not people-centric, but still, it is embedded in development. That's where the challenges are far more, because there is no one linear pathway. There is no metrics to measure adaptation like mitigation. So that makes it very complicated. And also, it's also lots to do with the sort of planning process, the the behavioral aspects of people, the governments, how they understand adaptation in a specific context. So that's becoming more and more a challenge. But then, it's important to understand that good development is good adaptation. Adaptation is nothing but seeing development through a climate lens and reorganizing our own, reorienting our plans, processes, so that it yields a good result. In other words, I'll put it simply, I would rather argue that it is in a given context, the basic indicators of development, like income or yield or say education, health, are showing a steadily good progress despite the climate change, despite the bad monsoons, despite droughts, floods. That's more important. That's the clear-cut indicator of how adaptation is successful. To some extent, one could really say that. And of course, we are dealing with a lot of uncertainties. In the climate language, the only certainty is uncertainty. So it's important to understand that day in and day out, governments are grappling with that. People are grappling with that. So it's important. There are always a surprise, though we plan for because that's a moving target. Adaptation is also a moving target. Today's adaptation in 10 years' time becomes maladaptation because the plans are not adequate enough to address that. The return periods are changing drastically today. So I think these are some of the important aspects of it. And then coming to the implementation perspective, if a farmer could sort of irrigate a land in a peak summer, the dry land, it shows sort of, and a city could sort of, despite the flooding, it could manage to, there is no stagnation of water you see in important business districts or whatever it is, So it's important. That's the sign of good adaptation to me. And that's very important, because the plans seem to be working and there are some processes which have been imbibed by the people and put into action. So I think these are some, even the power interruption without, if in a peak summer, if you get the power, uninterrupted power supply, that is also sort of, speaks to the resilience of the communities, of the, government's plans and stuff. So these are some of the examples. But again, it is not always true that, you get all these things, but there are a lot of challenges. Of course, we are moving in that direction because science is far more, precise today. There are good science, good evidence, good use of technology, and social capital. All the more important in adaptation is social capital. The adaptive capacity is a function of technology, finance, and social capital. This country has seen that, post tsunami, you've seen how many people, they don't know the language, they don't know the, cultural stuff of different places. People just took their backpacks and traveled to places, to South India, wherever the problem was. So the power of social capital has not been explored much within the context, and that traditionally speaking, that's one of the important asset of this country. And I think it has to be nurtured when you talk about adaptation. That plays a huge role. I'll stop here. Maybe just answer you. One of the questions, who leads it? Again, there are different stakeholders in this business, government, everyone has a responsibility, communities, governments, businesses. These are important players. And of course, civil society organizations, like the tools, what Srini is talking about, Those kind of tools also help in terms of not only understanding, providing solutions to this problem. It's not there. There are many players around.
Yeah.
Media has an important role as well. Forgot to say that I'm with the media people here. But one thing I want to flag here is in media, the coverage is far more for the floods, because the slow onset events like droughts have now been taking that sort of headlines, always, because the floods is very vision, sort of, you see, it's very visual. So it always it takes the headlines. So adaptation, sometimes, that is a problem. So it's important to also focus on the slow onset events.
Now, the obvious question, you and I have been looking at state action plans for a long time now, and we see that there's a long menu of things to do, but then half of them don't get done. As someone who's trying to track and report on these climate action plans, what gets prioritized? How do things change? What seemed important one day? I know you touched upon it, but how do things get prioritized in an action plan? What gets dropped? Why does it get dropped? And where does a related question, when finally decisions are taken and priorities are done, how does it embed itself in local action plans, on a village level, on a district level, from panchayat to district? How does it play out?
Yeah.
And who do we go and talk to if we want to find out more information?
Good question, Shai. We're still grappling with those things, but still, whatever the knowledge we gather through the work what we've done so far, I can reflect a little bit on that. Also, one should understand the sort of how the genesis of this SAPCC. In other words, it's sort of a top-down sort of an approach. It trusted on the states, first of all. There is in 2008 the National Action Plan. The climate action plan, the National Climate Action Plan came into being, and the states were asked to sort of come out with their own state action plans. At that point in time, there's not much of science available, and it's very difficult. People have not been thinking in the climate context, so it is very difficult for states. All that they came out is they thought there's some money available to be grabbed from the central government, who's funding. Those kind of confusions were there. Then everybody sort of, the back of their own envelope calculations, they had money and the plans they put together in a very haphazard way. But of course, some beginning has been made. One should acknowledge that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a plan at all. So the version 1 of it was like that, sort of very hurriedly done. That's where the problem is. One, at least it made you think about it. But then, there are inherent problems that's sort of when it comes to climate action, because these are multi-sectoral, multidimensional. There are many facets to it. So it's important to kind of bring them together. That in itself is a challenge, where we have not been experiencing that, because every sector has been impacted differently, as like every other community has been impacted differently. So first of all, to understand the vulnerabilities, which sector is more vulnerable. The entry points are different for different states, because it all depends on the ecological endowments one has. Maybe the coastal area, then salinity and frequent flooding, storm. Extreme events becomes a very important entry point for them to sort of work on. There are water-deprived states, so water becomes an issue. So it's important to map those things first to understand where the risks lie, because all the resources should be directed. Only then it will be very purposeful. Otherwise, we're having umpteen number of laundry list of activities, plans. It's not going to work. That's very clear. At least the states could relate to that in the second version of it. When they're far more prepared to do that. But still, there are huge gaps in it. So it's important to understand the vulnerabilities, first of all, where the state needs the money. Because again, more often times it's also sort of the power is vested with the environment department to prepare these things, which is not always a department which has the sort of ears of the government. So one of the weakest links is that unless the finance is involved, it becomes very difficult to sort of, come out with the budgetary process and stuff. So that's one factor. Another one is also complementing this is the budget plans. You need to understand, not that every activity should be supported by a new budget or something. There are ongoing schemes, there are ongoing programs. How do you sort of piggyback on those things? How do you leverage those becomes an important. That way, you have to understand a sort of a resource mobilization. It's a sort of complete landscape of the financial architecture of the state, public finance, private sector finance, the CSR money which has been pumped in today. So we have a sort of better understanding of that. Then it becomes easier to at least where the gaps are, one could fill easily. So these are very typical sort of an issue, but we have come a long way. I won't say it's a sort of a doomsday. There's certainly certain states have been very effective in coming out with this climate budgeting work, and I can talk about Tamil Nadu example, maybe another context or wherever it is, but it really fits in. That's where the sort of bringing all the departments together, it's in itself is a mammoth challenge where they have started making some headway. Some of the states are really making some good headways. So I think talking about the locally led adaptation, that is a very important component, which is because adaptation need to have a sense of history. We can't plan everything in vacuum today, because it has a cultural element to it. People have been doing some work in certain ways. Farmers have been adapting for so many years, but the information flow is far more, far less today, in the sense that the climate change is happening at a very rapid pace. So they couldn't cope with whatever the tools and technologies what they have. So that is, and again, it is important to factor their decisions in the process because they live in proximity with where things happen. They understand the impacts better than people sitting in Chennai or Mumbai or someplace, the policymakers who make these decisions. So that is why it's important to capacitate them, to empower them, to bring them into the fold. And it is also sort of, speaks to the climate justice point of view. The equity becomes a very important aspect to it. So I think the planning process, if it is done that way, it becomes really very effective in many ways. There are several agencies coming out. The UNCDF has floated a project called Locally Led Adaptation, UNCDF Local, what is it called? UN Local. So these are very interesting even there are agencies which could come and give that additional elements for adaptation related intervention. Typical development intervention like World Bank is funding, then the additionality for adaptation could be funded by somebody else. So that sort of elements and new mechanisms are also coming out today. So I think, look, it's only sensible to anchor that in local context, so that it's whatever the planning is far more richer and very practical.
Thank you, Nambi. I actually want to throw that same question to Srini as well, because it's all about tracking money. You want to see how the execution is being done, you have to track the money. And Srini, from climate indicators, from how do they move to budget lines, departmental mandates, timelines, things that media can actually track. Yeah. Yeah, go on.
I spoke earlier about the India Climate and Energy Dashboard, but then there are also other trackers, like I said, that we have. So, for example, we also have the Gujarat Climate Action Tracker. Now, if I look at the Gujarat Climate Action Tracker, now the big point is how do we sort of link a strong dashboard basically connects evidence to budgets to ownership, and ownership to delivery. Now, as Nambi also said, there is already a lot of money within the system and with a lot of projects or a lot of programs. Now, the whole issue is how do we ensure that the money within the system is spent before we go outside the system, right? Now, when you look at the Gujarat Climate Action Tracker, now that's one tracker. The link is, anyway, we'll share the presentation with you. It's an embedded link. Now, if you look at data and look at the linkage between climate variability and projections, what it shows you for each of the districts, all the 34 districts of Gujarat, what we have done is we've looked at what the climate variability historical data says, and then going forward, what would be the change in temperatures, the change in rainfall patterns up to 2100 in a business as usual scenario. Now, that is fine, but then what are its implications on the risks to, let's say, agriculture? What are the economic risks? What would be the GDP loss because of heat-driven productivity loss? What would be how would the rising temperature impact the Gujarat workforce, for instance, or the workforce in the district? How will it impact agriculture and productivity? How would it impact because of the rainfall pattern or changes in rainfall pattern? How would it impact the sowing? The sowing season, for instance, and then the resultant impact in the kind of productivity, public health, water resources, coastal ecosystems. It covers the whole thing. So primarily what it does is that when you bring in data, when you bring in the climate variability data, so your climate variability data is built on your historic the historic data, where you say that, okay, this has been your change in your temperature, this has been your change in your precipitation patterns, which means that there'll be a change in your rainfall patterns. And if this trend continues, right, these are going to be your impacts. And if this impacts continue in business as usual scenario, what would be its impact on various aspects of your daily life, right? Energy demand, tourism, urban infrastructure, agriculture productivity, so water availability, water access, and so on. Now, based on that, then you can also say that, okay, if I want to reach a scenario where now let's look at two scenarios, right? One scenario is that we want India to be net zero by 2070, but there's also a scenario where we also want to be India to be Viksit by 2047. That is a developed nation by 2047. So when you look at both of these, then and when you say that, okay, with these kind of data that's available, what are the kind of actions that you need to do? So there's another slide there, which also takes us to the Tamil Nadu Climate Action Tracker. When you look at the Tamil Nadu Climate Action Tracker, what it does is for each of these districts, based on the climate variability, based on the current carbon footprint of that particular district, it identifies a set of projects that can be done. Now, for example, it says that use of solar pump for irrigation in the Nilgiris, or shift to private electric mobility from X% to Y%, which is in line with Government of India target, which is in line with the target set by the state government. When you have these projects actually clearly identified, what we call as a project pipeline, you can also track. So you have a year-on-year project pipeline. So you say that year one, you need to increase your public transport electric buses from X to Y, and these are the kind of patterns that you would do. Then you also say that for the cost of this is where you have the budgets already in existing programs and of both the national government as well as the state government. So you have the FAME policy of national government, which also has money for public buses. Then you have money, for example, Tamil Nadu. So Tamil Nadu, the Pollution Control Board has actually given money to procure CNG buses, but then can they also procure electric buses, right? And these buses can be applied on this so and so route. And so this would be your emission reduction, but this would also be the kind of impact that it would have in your reducing or keeping your temperature trajectory to under 1.5 degrees. So you have these detailed interventions, which is more like your project pipeline. And so primarily what I would like to say, or the point that I'm trying to make, is that you have these data, you have these historical data, and then you have the current data. You do your planning, you do your projections, you come up with your project pipeline, and then you can also track how these are being implemented and what would be its impact, not just on your GHG emissions, but on overall livelihoods, on overall improvement of the ground situation in each of these geographies. Now, what we also realize is that, and this also is a question that Shai asked Nambi, but then, having a national level is fine, but you need to have state, and even preferably you need to have a district level, city level, a panchayat level action plan that can then be a more bottom-up approach to address climate change. The advantage is there is that what you're doing is you're making an action plan which is very tailor-made to a particular geography. So it's not like, and I'll give you an example. There's one way of saying that Tamil Nadu, and let's take the case of Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu will have to add X gigawatts of solar. Right? It's very easy to say that, or rather it's easy to say that. But then if you can say that Virudhunagar or a particular district or a particular city can have Y megawatts, and that builds up, and these are the geographies where it can come. What it would also do is it will also, given that, and again, I'm giving solar as an example. Solar has got a huge land footprint. Every megawatt of solar requires 4 to 5 acres of land, right? And that land needs to be available. right? So now if I say in a particular geography, these are the particular areas where you could have deploy solar, or you cannot deploy utility scale solar, but you need to look at rooftop solar. This particular district, Nilgiris, for instance, will not have enough land because of the fragile ecosystem to look at utility scale. Right. So when you come up with a very ground up planning, you can really make a foolproof plan, which will then avoid litigation in the long run. It would ensure that there is that plan, that the 100 gigawatt target for Tamil Nadu is broken across various districts, and you know what your targets in each of the districts is. You can also pinpoint what are the land locations for that, and also identify that that land is actually suitable for that solar project. And that also will create the kind of employment opportunities, so on and so forth. So you also bring in the just element or the people-centric element there. What
Thank
it will also do is who will do it. Now, when you talk of, again, let's take Tamil Nadu as an example. So Tamil Nadu has got the Tamil Nadu Green Climate Company, which is like the nodal agency for all climate action. But then when it comes to electricity and power, it is to the Tamil Nadu Electricity Board or the Tangent-Co and the Tamil Nadu Energy Department. If it's transport, it's the Transport Department. So each of these departments will have to take action. When you prepare these project pipelines, it will also help to identify who will do what or who is responsible to do it, and you can also have trackers at that level. So you can track, okay, this department or this agency will have to do A, B, C, D, E in this time frame, and then you also have a timelines. You also have what is your priority. So you again say, when you do it very geographic specific, and when you link it to data, you can say, okay, again, when you say data, let's say one of the starting points that we usually do when we make a plan is to look at a carbon footprint of a particular region, we look at the climate variability, and look at the ground situation. So when you say carbon footprint, and when you look at the trajectory of carbon footprint, so you say, okay, the transport sector in Nilgiris again is the highest emitter, right? So this is the area where you need to change. So what are the solutions? You can look at electric mobility. You can look at non-motorized transport. Again, tourism is a huge impact on Nilgiris. So then you have this new rule which says, okay, cap on tourism. So when you have a cap on tourism, then you may have an impact on the hospitality sector. So how will you impact? How will you then come up with policies that the hospitality sector is not impacted? Now, taxi drivers are not going to like it when you say, okay, you can't go more than 100 cars every day into Ooty, for example. I'm just throwing some number in the air. Or hotel industry or the homestay may not like it. So then how do you convince them, or how do you bring in the argument saying that, okay, in the short run, you might have a small loss in income, but in the long run, it will ensure that there are no landslides in Ooty, your landslides reduce, and because of that, your income levels over a period of time, you continue to get your incomes over a period of time, may not be in the short period, but in the longer period, your income levels will continue. You will still have that tourism influx, right? So that's the kind of that you need to bring up.
That was a very, very useful example. Also, because you're touching on what was going to be my next question around how do we stop looking at mitigation and adaptation separately, and you actually in this, by illustrating this example, has helped me. I'm just because we want to give 15 minutes to our participants also to ask questions, but before we go there, and Shini, I come back to you, uh, Nambi, on the same lines, when it comes to development stroke adaptation stroke resilience building, and it's been on for some time, almost 10 years. I've been, starting from climate resilient Kerala, if you recall, to now climate resilient villages in Tamil Nadu. There's enough data available. What do you think should be the institutional reforms we should be looking at? Shini's already talked about climate budget tagging, empowered climate cells, interdepartmental, bringing departments together, via a company or what. What do you think can help states execute, monitor, and report better when it comes to adaptation? Because we are reporting on adaptation. We are looking into adaptation funds. We are looking at loss and damage funds. So how do we improve overall climate reporting, both by the state and then, of course, through the media? This question to Nambi, and then I'll come back to you very quickly, Srini.
Thanks, Shai. I mean, there is no one solution, as you know. It's important to sort of address all the things what you mentioned about the CBT, that is the climate budget tagging, empowering the climate cells, the departments, as well as the sort of interdepartmental coordination becomes very essential. Above all, data is another. There are a lot of inadequacies of data. That is very important. And also, whatever the available data is of quality, that's a big question. So it's important to sort of address that. And we are progressing again here, but certainly these kind of dashboards are very important in tracking where the gaps are, so that they could be sort of immediately attended to. So that tools are very important today. There are wonderful tools today, and community-based MRV tools are also shaping up today. There are several sort of tools available. So I would rather cite an example of the project what we are doing with Tamil Nadu, that is the climate resilient villages model. This, I mean, we've done in 11 districts, they've rolled out, and we have done the DPR at the village level for each of those districts, because it's important to sort of understand. I mean, therefore, so far there is no DPR done at that level. So bringing all the nitty-gritties of people's own aspirations, people's own problems into that, built into that. So the reason I'm citing this example is we are also sort of mooting this idea of having a project management unit at the village level. It also provides a couple of livelihoods for the people, and the guys who run this thing are sort of chosen from the villages. This is a very important sort of thing. They know the territory well, they know the problems well, they can speak to their own people. So the PMUs are very important, so that they kind of add to the tracker all the time to sort of inform the state agency or the TNGCC mechanism what you have. I mean, TNGCC is a wonderful mechanism, bringing in all the departments together. They've been struggling so hard to sort of bring this. There are wonderful climate cells existing in every state, but people that's mostly housed in DST or in the Department of Environment, which doesn't have much of a say. So this kind of unit, which is also has external people in the board, is a small, is a sort of special purpose vehicle to sort of address those issues, so that the single window clearance happens for all the projects and stuff. So it becomes job easier. So these kind of mechanisms, and another mechanism, again, I'm very much leaned on Tamil Nadu because lots of things are progressing there. One other important thing, I think they came out with the sort of they institutionalized it. We sort of started the work on climate proofing of district plans. They saw the merit in it and sort of institutionalized it. They've kind of spread this out 38 districts across the board and put the burden on the accountability on the DFOs. They are the nodal officers to deliver on this thing. Anything to do with climate change in the state, in the district level today. That's the sort of mechanism. It's also evolving. They're also learning. It's not that they have all the solutions, but they're learning. These kind of mechanisms are very forward-looking, and certainly will be very. Again, it's all trial and error, but the leadership also counts to a large extent. That passion, sort of, who drives this process, and if it is the political will as well, that has been there. I think at all levels. That is, again, media plays a very important role. I just want to hammer this again and again, because there's nothing like media. One of the things which a report comes out of media, immediately it gets an attention to the politician, and in a language they could speak. There's a science policy interface takes place, and they could relate to the problem. Once they relate to the problem, they understand that better, and they will start taking actions. So I think, institutionally, there is so much to do. At community level, we have always, though you have taken that for granted, there is always the communities comes together when there is a problem. There is always, I've seen when there is a challenge, they always, of course, there are some interest groups within the communities that always happens. That those are the challenges. Who resist it? These are the people who resist it. The elite capturing always happens. But then, the government should have a way to sort of handle this. And community disaster management plans, all these things seem to be, the plans are there, and unless it is given institutional structure, it won't work. And we need not create new institutions. It's important to sort of leverage those existing sort of institutions, the mechanisms what we have at the ground. Let's stop here.
Nambi, in fact, there's a hot-footing question on that one from Meena Menon in the chat box, and questions have started. So Srini will just continue the conversation. My question is, so like Tamil Nadu, is this level village planning for adaptation happening anywhere else? And also, how is the farmers local adaptation knowledge being integrated in local planning. Any examples, Nambi or Srini?
There are quite a few examples in Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh has tried. One of the differences is more when they talk about climate smart villages, but only they talk about the agriculture aspect of it. Bihar or this thing. Whereas this is a very comprehensive sort of, we look at the energy part of it, the waste management part of it. Again, the territory defines the kind of menu of options you have, what to choose from. Because if it is a coastal area, salinity becomes a huge issue. So I think there is climate smart agriculture, there are a few models, but nobody has looked comprehensively, to my knowledge, that, all sectors coming together. This is one of good examples, I would say. Again, it is all, I'm not saying, just thumping about it. It's a question of we have to wait and watch. But all the basic exercise, what is to be done, has been done. So let's see. And it is we'll see another couple of years to see how it is panning out and what lessons we could learn. It's also important to understand those failures today. It's not about all that everything is not successful in life. So it's important to document that.
Srini.
Yeah, so we have developed, climate smart action plans for 43 gram panchayats of UP, and we are also working with Niti Aayog to develop gram panchayat action plans across 11 gram panchayats, which are part of the aspirational blocks program of the Prime Minister. Now, coming to UP, where I would humbly like to differ with Nambi saying that it is not comprehensive. It is definitely comprehensive, but the only reason where the big difference between the UP Gram Panchayat action plans and the Tamil Nadu is Tamil Nadu was anchored with the Tamil Nadu Green Climate Company with a very strong leadership, which sort of brought together various departments. Now, what happened in UP was that it was initially anchored by the Climate Change Department, but then there was this problem of who's going to do the implementation. Is it the Panchayat Raj Department? Is it the Climate Change Department? And finally, the Climate Change Department said, okay, we have done it. Now it's to you, the Panchayat Raj Department. The Panchayat Raj Department said, but you did it, so you should. So the problem was you do not have a godfather or godmother there. So somewhere it got lost. And that's where, that's the big difference. I wouldn't say it's the comprehensive or lack of comprehensive plan. It is where it is anchored and who anchors it and who drives it. I think that's very important. But I just want to make one point going beyond the panchayat, Shai, and I want to bring the importance of data, right? And I want to give one example that journalists would like to know about. See, now we're doing a strong push on the PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana, right? The solar rooftop program, right? Now, one thing that keeps coming up is while you have the penetration of the rooftop solar has definitely improved across major cities, a lot of discoms are having an issue with that. Why? Because bulk of the generation comes during the daytime, whereas the peak demand is in the evening time. So what happens is, despite all the generation of solar during the day, they still have to buy costly power in the evening. Right? Now, you have this data there. You have this problem that has surfaced. How do we address that? So where do battery storage comes in? Are you looking at huge battery storage, or can we actually have consumers to install battery storage and incentivize them? Can you have smaller storage outside distribution transformers? I think these are the solutions that come with data. So I just wanted to bring that one example that people might be interested in.
Thank you, Srini. Thank you, Nambi. Okay, questions have started coming in, and I'm also opening the floor now. So if anybody has any questions to ask, please either put it in the chat box or raise your hand. Question from Jennifer Kishan. Is it more effective to have a bottom-up reporting of climate action policies, how things are affecting the last mile? Also, where would be some of the gaps in reporting on climate policies that you could flag for us, where you would like more in-depth reporting on? Maybe we start with Nambi and Srini. You come back to that.
It is very, very important. It's a very valid question. We should also, once they have a say in the plan process, then it is important to also sort of, get into the reporting. That is where the MRV structures comes in, the community-based MRVs and other things. So there should be some way to aggregate it, because otherwise it's standalone pieces. for a state or district to take action, it has to come together, this sort of information. So it is also not every village they could go and attend to this thing. So some level of aggregation has to happen. So in that sense, there are no available channel for that. These kind of dashboards are very important. That's why Srini's work, collecting all those information and having a track of it, again, post-monsoon, pre-monsoon kind of data. These sort of, outlook is very important to sort of plan better. I think, there are tools emerging, and this particularly the Keystones one, they've come out with this community-based MRV tool. Very interesting. They're also doing the training for the people in biodiversity, several aspects of it. It's a little more scientific. Citizens science is also very critical when you talk about, climate action. So their own observations have to be factored in. There should be some formalized mechanisms to capture this. Right now, it is very ad hoc, a little bit ad hoc. I'm sure, we are heading there.
Yeah. Thanks, Nambi. Srini, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think
especially the gaps in reporting, gaps in policies that we can report on. Nambi, you can also add to that.
Let Srini take it a crack.
Yeah, so I think it should be both a top-down as well as a bottom-up. While you do a state-level reporting on what's happening, you also have a district level or a more bottom-up reporting on what's happening. Particularly when some of these action plans are launched, then it's good to ask what's the status of the implementation, what's happening, who's owning ownership, and so on and so forth. Now, this is also very important because sometimes, the ownership. Okay, now when we look at a particular plan, and even the Gram Panchayat action plans or the district action plans, if there's a ownership now, and the ownership is more from the Tamil Nadu Green Climate Company or wherever it is, but can you also get the ownership from below? Now, that's where Nambi was talking about that the PMU, setting up PMU at the district level or the panchayat level really helps, where you have the collector or the panchayat pradhan who are being part of the committee and so on. But I think asking those pertinent questions even at that level would ensure that the ownership is not really at the state level or the national level, but it also transcends down to the district level or the panchayat level or the geography level where the plan is prepared or where you're looking at a certain project pipeline. So I would look at it from that. And there's another question that came, whether Trump's aid cuts have impacted. I don't think so.
Yeah, true. Before we go to Ruchi, this is a question that I've heard many times, even in our workshops. How do we ensure that in creating impact stories, last mile's voice is heard, women and climate change, children and climate, the most vulnerable at the last mile? Do you have any ideas, thoughts on how we could do it better?
Shai, if I can quickly jump in. I think this is important for one reason, right? Now, and again, let me give the example of energy transition, right? Now, when you look at energy transition, generally the approach is more a technology shift approach. So move from coal to solar or renewables, move from internal combustion engine to electric vehicles, etc., etc., etc. But now, it's not when you look at a transition and you say that, and you look at a developed country, etc., you can't just look at a mere technology shift. You need to bring in the people's angle there, right? Now, any shift will have, there may be impacted communities. So how do you ensure that impacted communities are not left out in this, in the transition? And so I think bringing that planning or getting that impact story, hearing the last mile voices will also ensure that your plans that you develop is not just a technological shift, but it is a holistic kind of thing where you bring in the kind of skills, the skill development, the kind of rehabilitation that is required, so on and so forth, right? And also the plans are rooted in communities, and it's people. There's an ownership of communities in that transition. So I think that is important.
We have last 3 minutes. Nambi, very quickly.
Yeah. I think, again, I can't agree more with Srini on this. Definitely, that first of all, the starting point to understand the differentiated impacts of climate change within a community, how women are impacted, disabled are impacted, and the children are impacted. I mean, even in the classical case of tsunami, women lost more lives, children lost more lives. So the wherewithal wasn't there. So it's very, very clear. So it's important to sort of address specifically, unless you map those things, it's very difficult to come out with good policies and stuff. So their voices have to be heard in many ways. One example again quickly, the seaweed cultivation has been largely seen as the domain of the men. In Ramanathapuram, recently, one of those agencies working there have also looked at, shallow places near to the coast area to cultivate seaweeds. They've identified certain species which will go nearer to the shore. And they've been trained in swimming, not long distance deep sea swimming. All this, there are lots of, again, is one of examples, but I'm saying there are, unless you systematically understand the problem, you cannot have a solution. So that way, we need to really, right from day one, you have to integrate those things. And the efforts are there. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Srini and Nambi. We are in the last 2 minutes, and if Ruchi, you had raised your hands. If you want to go ahead, I think we can
Yes.
quickly. Yeah, please.
Just a
Quick.
reflection, very quick reflection. And I just want to make a note of my own observations in this whole domain of adaptation and mitigation work. I think sometimes institutional arrangements with the tools are one part of the story, while programs and success stories within a community, within a particular village is one part of the story. And it's very sometimes difficult to see the two together. So the people-centric approach is still something I find a big gap. And within that, even though policies are there, very good policies on the paper, but funding gaps are major and huge. So there is still a lot of disconnect between how we are approaching this whole thing, due to which I feel sometimes we are not able to really get the results we want, whether it is to do with our women who are impacted or the marginalized communities or really people who we want to hear. So just a reflection, and how we can build on those is something I would like to see further as the series continues. So thank you.
Thank you, Ruchi. Thank you, Nambi. Thank you, Srini. I have taken the liberty of sharing Srini's presentation in a PDF form in the chat box. I've also taken the liberty of sharing both your emails with everyone for follow-up questions. The presentation is important because there are lots of links which we couldn't open today, the Gujarat Climate Action Tracker, etc. So please do have a look. This series and this session will also be shared on YouTube very soon, and you can share it further. Please write to our speakers for more information. And I want to thank Pritish for giving the logistics support, and everybody at Climate Change Hub at HCJ for allowing the session to happen. Thank you so much, and see you soon. Everybody have a very good day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Shai.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.